Hey everyone, I hope that you're doing well this spring break. I'm sure it doesn't feel anything like spring break. Definitely doesn't to me. But I wanted to check in with you to let you know about a few different things that are going on with class. Of course, our class is already online, so we're just moving ahead. But I did want to let you know that I recognize that even though we were already online, things have changed for sure. If you're in a situation where you no longer have access to the internet for whatever reason, or you don't have as much or as frequent, I guess I should say, access to the internet, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know so that I can help adjust accordingly. I'm here to help, and I'm here to help us continue our study of the border, but also make sure that we all can support each other to get through this difficult time. So please don't hesitate to let me know what's going on, and I'll see what I can do to help. Let me check my notes to make sure I cover everything. So I did just finish reading the discussion on the Alvarez book. Those of us who were, or I should say, those of us who are in 416 undergraduate students were only assigned to read Alvarez. The graduate students were also assigned to read Julian Lim's book, Porous Borders, along with the Alvarez book. Um, I'm planning in my blog post for this one, which will be coming in the next couple of weeks, to kind of talk about some of the reasons that I decided to assign these two together. So that's something to look forward to as we continue. I added a couple of comments and questions on the discussion board. So if you're in a position where you're still needing to complete that discussion, please go ahead and do so as you're able to, and look for those questions as well. So again, there's something there for you to respond to, and I'm really interested to hear your ideas on. There's actually a couple things that Steve and Daniel raised that I sort of built on. So I'm interested to see where that can go. Also, as I often do, and I think as will be important for us given our social distancing and some of the things that we're having to address now, I'm offering extra credit for a couple of things. One of those is if you go to the course blog, I'll put a link below. I've added an entry on um, one of my memories from one of the first times I visited the Columbus Palomas border station as I was doing dissertation research back in 2010. This was a post I wrote last year for this same class back then. But what I'm asking you to do for extra credit is add a post to your blog, and you can take it in any direction, but it's just writing about a time that you visited the border, if you've lived on the border, something that was memorable to you, an event that happened there. If you haven't visited the border, you can write about where you would like to visit and why along the border. So it's open to everybody. It's an opportunity to just share some of your thoughts and a little more about why perhaps this class is something that's meaningful to you or something you are interested in. The second opportunity for extra credit that I have is something you can also respond to either by just clicking to respond to this announcement. So you can respond right here beneath the video. Um, I can't remember if it's called a comment or a response or whatever it is that allows you to respond to this in Canvas. Or you can write an entry on your own blog and share it with me. Either way, another opportunity for some extra credit. I wanted to point out something that I noticed the first time I read through C.J. Alvarez's book. I really love the book for a lot of the reasons you all mentioned, and it's fascinating to me to think about um, the history of the built environment of the border. As Jim Grossman, who's the executive director of the American Historical Association, has said quite frequently lately, everything has a history. But sometimes we don't think about it. Sometimes we take things for granted. And certainly the built environment of the border is one of those things that can be easy to take for granted. Of course, there's a story behind why there's a strange section of wall, of fence, 3 miles in each direction from the Columbus Palomas border entry. There are reasons for this. There are stories behind them. Sometimes there are more mundane reasons for some of these decisions than others. But again, I think Alvarez's book makes a really important contribution to our understanding of the border. That said, he did something that brought me back to grad school. Um, my experience in graduate school was different than for those of you who are taking this class for graduate credit online, in that I never took a graduate class online. And most of my graduate classes were seminars where we would sit around a big table with the professor and with other students. We would have a book, so I've kind of followed that model, focusing on a specific book that we were reading. And people would sort of try to tear it apart because it's really easy to pick away at the things an author didn't do in order to kind of get your face time with the professor and have something to say. Um, than to explain what a book does well. We got to the point, when we had really good professors who would push us to do this, where we could say, here's what the author was trying to do, this is what the methodology was, and here's how well he or she succeeded. But again, sometimes those conversations, especially with grad students, can devolve into being kind of nitpicky and critiquing authors for not writing the book you wish they had written. So case in point here, I have my copy of Borderland, Border Water right here in front of me. Looking at the introduction to chapter 3 on page 96, this is a chapter called Police and Waterworks on the Border. At the top of 96, the last sentence of that first paragraph there says, however, the first long-distance land border fence, built by IBWC's U.S. section, mainly between 1948 and 1951, was a construction project exclusively on U.S. soil. And so he's talking about some of the reasons that he focuses so much on the U.S. side of the Boundary Commission, the building that it did, as opposed to also looking at what was going on from the Mexican side of that binational commission. There's a footnote, though, on that one. It's footnote number 4. So if you flip to the back on page 252, where that note is, he critiques both St. John. He's not critiquing her book that we read, but he's critiquing a piece that she published in a book that was co-edited by Ben Johnson and Andy Graybill called Bridging National Borders. It's Bridging National Borders. I'm forgetting it, but the name of the book that it's in isn't right here. Her article is called Divided Ranges, and it does kind of cover some of the ground that she covered in the book that we read. As we know, and as I've pointed out and tried to get us to talk about, her focus was up to 1930, right? Mary Mendoza, who he also critiques, she published in one of the books that I recommended for this class. It wasn't a required one, but it was a recommendation. She kind of had that same focus of the early 20th century. All that to say, his critique of them is that they were talking about fences that weren't the fence he's talking about, claiming they were important. He's saying they weren't. It's a little more complex than that. You can read the whole paragraph. But my point is this. To me, this seems to be kind of an unfair critique of St. John and Mendoza for not having written the book he wished they had written. Or at very least, he's not recognizing how they limited their studies, right? They stopped at 1930, so why would they have written about this fence that he's talking about that was constructed in the late 40s and early 50s? So again, I think it's a little bit of an unfair critique. I would like to hear your thoughts on this. So again, this is an extra credit opportunity. You can post your response to what I'm saying either on your blog or just as a response to this video here in announcements. Sorry it's taken me so long to explain all of this, but I think it's really important for us to recognize, and I think we've done a good job so far in this class, but to recognize what an author is doing and what they're not doing. And actually on page 9, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, in Alvarez's book. No, 9 is 10, page 10. He says a brief word about what this book is not at the beginning of the first full paragraph on that page. So go back there as well, because he's kind of trying to preempt these kinds of critiques that I'm blaming grad students, but historians and other scholars all too often do this as well. They critique a book for not being what they wish it was, despite the fact that the author said, "Here's what I'm doing," and it's not this. So I think he does that here. He's explaining what he's meaning to do, what he's not trying to do, what he sees as being beyond the scope of his study. But then I think he critiques them for doing something that was beyond the scope of their studies. So again, what do you think? Am I reading that right? Is he making a fair critique of St. John's work since we've read it? Again, it's a different article, but the same ideas are there. It's something that she also used to in her book. Um, so let me know what you think. Let me know if you need help in any way, shape, or form, or if you're experiencing lack of access to internet or resources. Sorry, this video dragged on a little longer than I mean them to usually do, but I hope you're having a good spring break in spite of it all.